She killed 7 men in just over a year, shocking the nation with her brutal efficiency and chilling motives. Aileen Wuornos, a name synonymous with fear, took to the highways of Florida, leaving a trail of bodies and questions. Her victims, men who encountered her by chance, became unwilling participants in a macabre saga. The media dubbed her the Highway Killer, a label that encapsulated the terror she inspired. Wuornos's crimes were not the work of a typical serial killer. She was a drifter, a woman who lived on the fringes of society, selling her body to survive. But beneath her exterior lay a simmering rage and a history of trauma that exploded into violence. Her killings were marked by a unique brutality, a viciousness that suggested more than mere desperation. The public was both horrified and fascinated by Wuornos. Her story became a grim reflection of societal failures, an amalgamation of abuse, neglect, and mental illness. The courts would eventually decide her fate, but the debates she ignited lingered on, unresolved and haunting. Her legacy, a chilling reminder of what lurks beneath the surface of societal norms, remains a topic of endless discussion and analysis. Aileen Wuornos's descent into infamy began long before her first murder. Her childhood was a tapestry of neglect and abuse, woven with threads of abandonment that left indelible scars on her psyche. Born in Michigan in 1956, Wuornos was dealt a harsh hand from the start. Her father, a convicted child molester, was absent from her life, leaving her to be raised by her unstable mother, who would soon abandon her altogether. At the tender age of 4, Wuornos and her older brother were sent to live with their maternal grandparents. This new home, however, was far from a sanctuary. Her grandmother was an alcoholic, and her grandfather was a violent man who subjected Wuornos to physical and sexual abuse. These formative years were marked by chaos and fear, laying the groundwork for her troubled future. Wuornos's early experiences shaped a worldview steeped in mistrust and anger. She learned to fend for herself, often running away from home and engaging in petty theft to survive. By the time she reached adolescence, Wuornos was already on a path of self-destruction, fueled by the demons of her past. Her life was a testament to the enduring effects of childhood trauma, a haunting shadow that loomed over her every action. By the age of 15, Aileen Wuornos had become a full-fledged runaway, living on the fringes of society with no support system to fall back on. With limited options and a history that left her ill-equipped for conventional employment, she turned to sex work as a means of survival. It was a desperate choice, born out of necessity rather than desire, and it would define much of her adult life. Wuornos's entry into the world of sex work marked the beginning of a transient existence. She drifted from town to town, selling her body in exchange for money, food, or shelter. This lifestyle, fraught with danger and instability, exposed her to the darker side of humanity. She endured violence and exploitation, further entrenching her mistrust of people, particularly men. Despite the harsh realities of sex work, Wuornos found a semblance of control in this world. Yet, the psychological toll was immense. This phase of her life was a prelude to the violence that would later define her, a grim foreshadowing of the lengths she would go to protect herself in a world that had been nothing but hostile. The year 1989 marked a turning point in Aileen Wuornos's life, as the violence that had simmered beneath the surface erupted in a series of deadly encounters. It began with the murder of Richard Mallory, a man Wuornos claimed had brutally assaulted her, prompting her to kill him in self-defense. This killing set off a chain reaction, leading to the deaths of 6 more men over the next year. Wuornos maintained that each murder was an act of self-preservation, a response to attempted sexual assaults by her clients. Her claims painted a picture of a woman cornered by circumstance, fighting back against a world that had constantly preyed upon her vulnerabilities. However, the brutality of the murders cast doubt on Wuornos's self-defense claims. Her victims were found shot multiple times, their bodies abandoned in remote areas. This excessive violence suggested a level of premeditation that contradicted her assertions of acting in the heat of the moment. For investigators, the pattern of her crimes indicated colder, more calculated motives. This violent chapter in Wuornos' life would culminate in her arrest, but not before leaving an indelible mark on the national consciousness. The investigation into Aileen Wuornos' murders revealed a wealth of evidence that cast significant doubt on her claims of self-defense. Forensic analysis of the crime scenes and victim autopsies suggested a level of violence inconsistent with her narrative of self-preservation. The sheer number of bullet wounds on several of the victims indicated an intent to kill rather than merely stop an attacker. Witnesses and acquaintances of Wuornos provided further testimony that undermined her story. They described a woman who frequently spoke of her disdain for men and her willingness to resort to violence if necessary. These accounts painted a picture of Wuornos as a deeply troubled individual whose anger and resentment had reached a dangerous boiling point. In addition to this troubling character evidence, Wuornos' own behavior following the murders raised suspicions. She was known to use her victims' belongings, including their cars and credit cards, suggesting a level of premeditation and a motivation beyond mere self-defense. Prosecutors argued that Wuornos' actions were driven by a combination of greed, anger, and psychological instability, rather than the instinctual fight-or-flight response she claimed. The narrative of self-defense crumbled under the weight of these revelations, leaving behind the stark reality of a series of brutal, cold-blooded murders. By the time Aileen Wuornos stood trial in 1992, the case against her was formidable. Her history of violence, coupled with the overwhelming evidence presented by the prosecution, painted a grim portrait of a woman driven by dark impulses. The trial was a media spectacle, capturing the public's attention with its sensational details and the stark figure of Wuornos, who seemed both defiant and resigned. Wuornos was charged with multiple counts of murder, and the prosecution argued for the death penalty, citing the heinous nature of her crimes. Her defense team, meanwhile, sought to highlight her traumatic past and mental health issues, painting her as a victim of circumstance rather than a cold-blooded killer. Despite these efforts, the jury was unconvinced. The verdict was swift and unambiguous. Wuornos was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. The decision was met with mixed reactions. Some saw it as a just punishment for her crimes, while others viewed it as a failure of the justice system to address the root causes of her behavior. Her conviction marked the end of a murderous chapter in her life, but it also signaled the beginning of a new phase, a protracted legal battle over her fate and the broader implications of her case. The trial of Aileen Wuornos attracted significant media attention, transforming her into a national figure. The public was captivated by the story of a female serial killer, challenging traditional gender norms. This attention both humanized and vilified Wuornos. Media coverage raised questions about mental illness and the justice system. Her troubled background suggested a link between her violent acts and psychological state. Experts debated her culpability and circumstances. This debate extended to broader discussions about the justice system and mental health. Critics argued her execution ignored root causes and missed rehabilitation opportunities. Death penalty supporters believed her crimes were too severe for leniency. Her case forced society to confront uncomfortable truths about gender, violence, and mental illness in the legal system. On October 9, 2002, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison. Her death marked the end of a tumultuous life, a final act in a grim saga of survival and tragedy. For some, her execution was a necessary conclusion to a story filled with violence and suffering. For others, it was a stark reminder of the complexities surrounding capital punishment. Wuornos' execution did little to quell the debates her life had ignited. Her case continued to serve as a cautionary tale about the impact of abuse, neglect, and mental illness on an individual's trajectory. Her story, with its elements of horror and humanity, became a subject of fascination for psychologists, criminologists, and the general public alike. Her life and crimes have been immortalized in numerous books, documentaries, and films, each exploring different facets of her troubled existence. These portrayals have contributed to a complex legacy, one that encompasses both horror at her actions and sympathy for her circumstances. Wuornos remains a figure of intrigue, her name synonymous with the darker aspects of human nature. Her story serves as a reminder of the importance of understanding and addressing the root causes of violence and the necessity of compassionate intervention before it is too late. The story of Aileen Wuornos, the highway killer, is a haunting narrative that forces us to confront the darker aspects of human nature. Her life, marked by violence and desperation, remains a powerful reminder of the consequences of neglect and abuse. Wuornos's legacy is complex, encompassing both the horror of her crimes and the sympathy elicited by her troubled past. Her actions have sparked important discussions about mental health, gender, and the criminal justice system. These conversations are crucial for more effective prevention and intervention strategies. Wuornos's life stands as a grim testament to the complexities of human behavior and societal conditions.